The cameras were flashing again. Can Yaman walked out of the restaurant in Rome, his hands still intertwined with Sara's. The moment they stepped outside, a dozen microphones surrounded them. Reporters shouting questions, lights blinding, and voices overlapping. It was chaos. He didn't say a word. But his eyes, they said everything. Because behind that calm expression, there was fire, the kind that comes from being judged, misunderstood, and attacked for simply loving someone. For months, Can and Sara's relationship had been under constant fire. Every move analyzed, every smile questioned, every silence turned into a scandal. Some said it was fake. Others said it was just PR. And some even dared to call it a betrayal to Demet. But Can stayed quiet. Until now. Because tonight, as he sat down for a live interview in front of millions, he finally spoke. And his message? It burned like wildfire. People think they know everything, he began, his voice steady but filled with restrained emotion. They create stories, they build lies, and they sell them as truth. But love doesn't need permission. It doesn't need explanation. It just happens. For a brief moment, the audience went silent. Even the host froze. Because this wasn't the usual Can Yaman, the charming actor who always knew how to smile through controversy. This was the real one. The man behind the camera. The one who was done pretending that the noise didn't hurt. He leaned closer to the microphone, his tone sharper now. You call yourselves fans? Then act like it. Stop turning love into a battlefield. Stop comparing Sara to anyone else. She is not Demet. She is not a headline. She is a person. And she's the woman I love. That line hit like thunder. Within minutes, the internet exploded. Clips from the interview flooded social media. The hashtag #CanDefendSara started trending worldwide. But behind the trending chaos, something deeper was happening. For the first time, Can didn't look like a man caught in rumors, he looked like a man fighting for peace, for truth, for the right to feel without being crucified. And as the lights dimmed in the studio, he whispered one last thing, barely audible, but unforgettable: you can judge me all you want. But at least I have the courage to love. The next morning, Italy woke up to chaos. Every entertainment site, every gossip page, every talk show, all of them were replaying that one interview. Can Yaman defend Sara Bluma? His most emotional words yet. Demet Özdemir's name resurfaces again. It was everywhere. But what most people didn't know was that this outburst wasn't spontaneous. It had been building up for months, a slow storm brewing behind the actor's silence. Because while the world saw smiles and red carpets, what they didn't see were the private messages, the hate campaigns, the endless comparisons between two women who never asked to be enemies. Sara, meanwhile, had stayed graceful through it all. She had never attacked, never answered the rumors, but she had cried. And Can had seen it. He'd seen her scrolling through comments late at night, reading things no one deserved to read. Homewrecker. Demet was better. You'll never replace her. Those words, they cut deep. So when he finally spoke, it wasn't about defending himself, it was about protecting someone he loved. Because for once, Can Yaman wasn't the actor. He was the man behind the fame, behind the perfection. Still, the reaction was brutal. Some fans cheered, finally, he spoke his truth. Others turned on him completely, how dare he bring Demet into this again? He's changed. He's not the same Can anymore. Within hours, tabloids began twisting his words. Can Yaman slams Demet fans, Can Yaman chooses Sara over Demet. It wasn't true, but truth no longer mattered. The fire he had lit burned beyond control. Sara tried to call him that evening. He didn't pick up. Not because he didn't want to, but because he knew his voice would break. That night, Rome felt quieter than usual. He sat by the window of his apartment, the city lights reflecting off the glass, and replayed the interview in his mind. Did I go too far? He whispered to himself. But then he remembered the look on Sara's face, the way she had smiled when he told her not to worry anymore. And for the first time in months, he felt peace. Because sometimes defending love means risking everything, your image, your fans, your past. And Can had done exactly that. But what he didn't expect was what would happen next. Because someone else, someone from his past, had seen the interview too. And the next morning, her name was on everyone's lips again. Demet Özdemir. By the next morning, everything had changed. Can's bold words had reignited a fire the media hadn't seen in months, and right in the middle of it all stood Demet Özdemir. Every outlet was suddenly asking the same question: what does Demet think? Old photos of her and Can resurfaced on Twitter, fan edits began flooding TikTok, and the line between past and present started to blur again. Demet, however, didn't rush to speak. She was filming abroad when the interview aired, and for days, she kept her phone silent, her team declining all interview requests. But behind closed doors, she had seen the clip, every second of it. Those words. She is not Demet. They echoed louder than anything else. Not because they were cruel, but because they came from someone she once knew so deeply. Someone who, not long ago, had whispered that he could never forget her. Her friends said she didn't react, but she did. She sat there, quietly, watching that interview replay on her tablet. The same eyes that once looked at her with love now burned with frustration and defiance. And somewhere in that moment, Demet realized something painful. Maybe Can wasn't fighting against the world anymore, maybe he was fighting against his own memories. Meanwhile, Sara's silence spoke volumes too. She didn't post anything, didn't like or comment. But paparazzi caught her leaving her apartment in Milan. Her face pale, her lips pressed tight, as if holding back words she knew she couldn't say without making things worse. For Can, the storm was just beginning. Producers started calling, asking him to tone things down. His manager sent a long message that began with, "You've done enough damage for 1 week," and ended with, "Don't speak again without approval." But Can didn't reply. He sat alone in his kitchen, staring at a photo of Sara on his phone, and then, almost instinctively, he scrolled back to older ones. Demet's smile. Behind-the-scenes moments. Laughter that wasn't planned. The past and present collided right there, in his hands. And for the first time, he didn't know which one hurt more, losing Demet or having to defend Sara from her shadow. Outside, thunder rolled across Rome. Another storm was coming, one that no public statement, no interview, could stop. Because now, all three names, Can, Demet, and Sara, were trending together again. And this time, there would be no going back. The storm didn't wait till morning. By midnight, every network had replayed Can's interview at least 10 times, dissecting every word, every pause, every flicker in his eyes. Headlines screamed contradictions. Can Yaman regrets his words. Demet breaks her silence. Sara Bluma leaves Milan in tears. But none of it was true. The only truth was the silence inside Can's apartment that night, heavy, suffocating, and deafening. He sat on the edge of his bed, his phone still buzzing with unread messages. His mother had called. His manager had texted again. Sara had written, "I'm here if you need me." But he didn't answer any of them. Because how do you explain to the world that love, real love, doesn't always look perfect? That sometimes, defending one heart means breaking another? He stared at his reflection in the dark window, the same face millions adored, now hollowed by exhaustion. He remembered his own words. "You can judge me all you want. But at least I have the courage to love." They sounded brave then. Now, they felt like a burden. Suddenly, a vibration. Another message. This time, a name he hadn't seen in months, Demet. It wasn't a long message. Just one line. Sometimes silence hurts more than lies. He froze. His hand trembled. For a second, he wanted to reply, to say that it wasn't about her, that he never meant to hurt her. But he stopped. Because anything he wrote would only make it worse. He put the phone face down, took a deep breath, and whispered to the empty room, "I didn't mean to lose you twice." Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then stronger. It washed against the windows, blurring the city lights. Somewhere below, cameras still flashed, waiting for him to appear, to speak, to feed the chaos. But he stayed inside. Because for the first time in years, Ken didn't want to perform. He didn't want to act brave, or romantic, or unbothered. He just wanted to be a man who loved, lost, and still believed that love, no matter how messy, was worth fighting for. Hours passed. The rain turned into dawn. And when the first light of morning touched his face, he knew the damage was done, but maybe, just maybe, the truth had finally been spoken. Because love isn't about pleasing the world. It's about standing by what feels real, even when everyone else calls it a mistake. Morning light slowly filled the apartment, painting the room in a pale gold that felt more like forgiveness than sunshine. Ken hadn't slept. His thoughts had wandered all night, through old memories, unanswered calls, and the faces of two women who had changed his life in ways he could never fully explain. When his phone rang again, he didn't even look at the screen. He already knew it was his manager. Or maybe a journalist. Or maybe Sara. But he wasn't ready to talk to anyone, not yet. Instead, he walked to the balcony and watched the city come alive beneath him. Rome was awake again, just like every other morning. Cars honking, people hurrying, coffee cups clinking, the world moved on, even when your heart didn't. He whispered quietly, almost to himself, "They talk about love like it's a show. But love is not a show. It's a choice. And I made mine." He thought of Sara, her patience, her loyalty, her quiet strength in the face of endless hate. She had never asked him to defend her, never demanded a public gesture. She had simply stayed. That, he realized, was her way of loving, silent, but unshakable. Then his thoughts drifted to Demet, the laughter they once shared, the silence that followed, and the invisible thread that still seemed to pull their names together no matter how far apart they went. He smiled, not with regret, but with gratitude. Because some loves are meant to teach you, not to last. Down below, a reporter noticed him on the balcony and pointed up. Cameras started flashing again. Ken sighed. The world was watching once more. But this time, he didn't turn away. He looked straight into the chaos, into the lenses, the headlines, the noise, and he spoke. No microphones. No filters. Just his voice carried by the morning air. "You can keep talking. You can keep guessing. But from now on, I'm done hiding. I don't need your approval to be happy. I just need the truth. And I already have it." For a moment, even the street below went quiet. Because the world expected another scandal, another emotional outburst. But what they got instead was peace. Can Yaman didn't shout. He didn't fight. He didn't apologize. He simply stood there, calm, certain, and free. That image, of him standing on that balcony with the sunrise behind him, would become iconic. A symbol not of rebellion, but of self-respect. That day, his words spread across the world once more. But this time, people didn't just hear them. They felt them. "Love doesn't need defending," one fan wrote online. But courage like his reminds us why it's still worth believing in. And somewhere, far from the cameras, Sara smiled. She knew he didn't say her name, he didn't have to. His actions spoke louder than any headline. Because sometimes the loudest message a man can give is simply standing tall in the truth of who he loves.